early instrumental music was handed down through oral tradition. There was no notation available at that time. So, and another thing, it relied on the improvisational skill of the different players. Now, most of the knowledge that we have comes from artwork and historical documents from the time. We can see pictures of people playing and the way that they were holding them, and the different instruments that were combined with each other, and then also through historical documents when people talk about them and what they sounded like, and that sort of thing. But we didn't get any of our instrument or any of our knowledge from this music by way of notated music, because as we've mentioned several times, it didn't exist at this time. Now, the instruments from this period were from the same general groupings as they are today. They had strings, they had woodwinds, brass, and percussion, but they had a couple other additional ways of segregating the instruments, and one of them was they had soft instruments or indoor instruments, and these would have been instruments like a wind instrument would have been the recorder, a plucked stringed instrument, the lute. A bowed stringed instrument was the rebec. And there was also the loud instruments, and these were instruments that would have been played outdoors for tournaments or parades or things like that. And these were the instruments that made up the civic wind bands. An example of this is the shawm, which is the ancestor of the modern oboe. A sackbut, which is the ancestor of the modern trombone. A cornetto, it's a wooden instrument. It sounds rather brass-like, much brighter sound than you would typically think comes from a wooden instrument. They had trumpets, of course, but these were used mainly to heighten the grandeur of public events, or they could also be sounded in warfare. They were mostly used for some type of reinforcement at public events, some type of sonic reinforcement at these public events. They were not really used in the orchestra until the late 1600s. And then, of course, you had the percussion instruments. You had the tabor, which was this drum shaped like a cylinder. You had the nakers, which was small hand drums that you would have played in pairs. The advent of music printing made published dance music readily available for people. It would have been published in books of dance music for both amateur and professional players. Instrumentation would not have been specified at this time. It would have been determined by the occasion and what instruments you happened to have lying around. Whatever you had, you played it. So, in other words, they didn't write a piece for the flute per se. They just wrote a piece. If you had a flute, you played it on a flute. If you had a lute, you played it on a lute. Whatever you had, you played it. So because of this, there was a lot of flexibility in the performance. These books also featured a wide variety of dance types. You had the pavane, which was a slow, stately dance, kind of think of royalty with their white powdered wigs and the long robes, and you're not moving too fast. It's a very stately dance. The saltarello was a fast, very showy, flashy kind of a dance. And then the ronde, which was a circle dance, a line dance made for groups, kind of think of like a round dance. Susato was kind of a jack of all trades. He was a Flemish composer, an instrumentalist, and a printer. He composed and he arranged secular and sacred works. He didn't really specialize in any particular instrument per se, but he played all of the brass and woodwind instruments of his day. He was also a member of the prestigious Antwerp City Band, and this was a group that performed town concerts. They played for parades, they played for visiting dignitaries. They were also known to be expert improvisers. They could take a simple dance and just kind of jam on it and turn it into a really impressive work. Kind of a lot like a modern day jazz group. By comparison to some of the other people that we've looked at, Susato was a relatively minor composer. But the thing about it is he wrote music that was reflective of the street. He was kind of a commoner. So when we listen to Susato's music, it gives us a really good idea, not necessarily what the nobility and the aristocracy or even what the church was playing, but what the common people would have been listening to and dancing to and enjoying. The Danserie were a collection of dances by Susato, and they had or it's a collection rather of several different popular dance types, and it included the set of three rondes that we're going to be examining. Now, a ronde originated, as I said, as a country dance. It was like a circle dance or a line dance. Eventually, it made its way into the city and to the courts of the nobility. Now, as we'll talk about on the next slide, these are binary in form. They're A, B, B. You've got each section is going to be repeated, and the reason that they do that is it encourages embellishment. So you might have the band would play the first section the first time through, pretty much the way it was written, and then they would go back and repeat it again, and they would just kind of jam on a little bit. They would add little decorations, trills, whatever. They would just jam on the tune. Um, and the band that you're going to hear does a little bit of that as well. The dances flow from one to another. They don't really stop. And the idea here is once you get people on the dance floor and they're out dancing and doing their thing, they don't really want to stop. You want to keep the party going, as it were. So the dances kind of just move one from one right to another. You're not going to hear a pause between the two or between the three.